Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Tanner Yarro of Yarro Studios, a toy and game maker that has raised over $2 million on Kickstarter and has 2 utility patents in the gaming world, as well as sold and licensed toys and games all over the world. Here we are for round number 2. Tanner, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Super good. Feels good to be back. Love your show. Love being here.
Oh, thanks, man. Hey, it is great to have you here. There were some things that we wanted to get to on the last interview we had with you, but we didn't get to it. So we're going to cover some of that off in this interview as well. We're going to start off talking about your newest Kickstarter. I mean, it is doing very, very well. Very well. So let's talk a little bit about this. So it's called Immersive Battle Atlas. I'm going to get you to explain it in a couple seconds, but first, just for our audience, I like to put this in Canadian dollars because it's always larger. Okay. You've crossed over $406,000. You still have 5 days to go. 2,685 backers. That is a large campaign, I think, by most measures. So congratulations on that. Take us through what is the Immersive Battle Atlas. What is it?
Yeah, so the first campaign that I did about 2 years ago was a lay flat book of battle maps. And this one actually was an idea that I was throwing around with the guys at Crown Studios to make just a better, easier to use version of that. So all of the maps are removable. So in that GIF, you can see that these massive, I mean, that's a player's handbook right there.
Wow.
So these things are way bigger than most people expect. And yeah, it's just a lay flat book of battle maps. You know, we really have the world against us currently with COVID-19.
Yeah.
And November, December being the worst times to launch. That said, I think that we've pulled off a pretty successful campaign. We estimated we would hit about 500,000.
Wow.
And that was before we ever launched, and we figured we would chalk that up as a win. The first campaign, 16,000 backers was insane, almost $1 million. And so that obviously would be better, but with people not playing in person, and the timing of the launch. That said, it was purposeful. Next year, we want to do a campaign every 2 months. And surprisingly enough, this was my least favorite. So it was, let's get this one done. And so it doesn't push away any of the future campaigns for next year.
Let's just get the $500,000 out of the way, eh? And then get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Who did your artwork? I mean, the artwork is amazing. I love it.
So that artwork was a guy named Callum Best. He was part of our private Facebook group, Tabletop Innovators. The other two are my Yarro Studios artist, in-house artist, and Tochi Bogdan. He's from Italy.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So explain. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So you've said they're kind of these battle map books. But is it more like a portfolio where you've got like all these individual maps that are kind of in the portfolio, or how does that work?
Yeah, I have one right here in my closet. 2 seconds.
I'm going to describe this for our listeners who can't see what Yarro is about to, or Tanner's about to pull out of his closet here. But when you look at the Kickstarter page online, I encourage anybody listening to go check it out. You have these massive pages, and each page looks like a topographical map of a certain situation. So you might have like a canyon that's frozen over. There might be kind of a glacial lake. There could be a desert that has all these different types of jewels and gems kind of baked into the rock and so forth. It looks like there's another one. There's like a henge and a forest. So it's different environments, which is pretty cool. So is it a book or is it like a portfolio?
Yeah, so the first one was a book. This one it's made out of the same exact material. It just has a top and a bottom.
Mm-hmm.
and it's got a magnetic flap.
Oh, very cool.
And then the pages are even exactly the same material, a little bit thicker due to the latest stretch goal than the last one.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to describe this also for listeners because what you just showed is really cool. So it looks like kind of like a hard case portfolio that looks like a book, but when you open up the magnetic flap, you have a series of maps on the inside. When you pull the map out, then that map is actually folded in half. So it actually folds open flat. So you have this massive, massive,
Yeah,
uh,
it's massive. Like
yeah, map.
you
Yeah, that's cool.
can't see it. People don't even realize, like, pictures don't do it justice. It's the same size as the first book, and that was the coolest thing, was that I was a first time creator.
Yeah,
I knew that building the best possible product was going to be the most important thing, because these people were trusting me to make something that didn't exist yet. And just having it be larger than life, like, instantly sealed my fate with my backers. Like, this is a guy that we can trust to perform above and beyond, because that was the most feedback that we got was, holy crap, this thing is huge.
Now take me through also, because when I look at the Kickstarter page here, you have it looks like three different immersive battle atlases. There's a dungeons ones, there's a frozen wasteland, and there's another one which is like I think it's called Planescapes. Are these all included in the same portfolio, or are these three separate portfolios?
Yeah, so it's three separate portfolios. You
Okay.
have the Frozen Wastes kind of being a supplemental map pack for the new Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Okay.
And I don't know, winter is in right now. You had the Game of Thrones Winter is Coming.
Winter's
You have
coming.
a bunch of board games that are winter themed, and then the new D&D supplement book is winter themed, and there's just not a lot of battle maps. So that one will have Viking villages and frozen tundras and ice scapes, and there's a big dragon frozen in ice, so some cool stuff. Then the dungeon one is just that. It's a bunch of dungeon rooms and transition rooms so that you can put them together to build a big dungeon, 40 maps inside at like 17 by 22. It's like 60 plus feet of dungeon,
Wow.
real world dungeon on your table. And then Planescapes was just like everything else that didn't fit. So there's like just things that I want, and that seems to have worked in the past. It's because I never want to build something that I would never use. And
Sure.
so there's gnomish tanks and airships and inside the belly of beasts and mushroom gardens, just everything that didn't really fit in dungeons and planescapes, floating islands.
And then, so when somebody pledges, do they get all three, or is the pledge levels kind of, because I was seeing like um, the different pledge levels. You can get one atlas, two atlases, or three atlases. So the three atlases, that's basically the three separate atlases you'd have as that pledge. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so advice to those listening that want to do Kickstarter, your goal as a product creator should be to increase the average pledge number as high as you can. And so with our first campaign, I just did one book
Okay.
and not really any add-ons, and the average pledge was like $40. So with this one, I'm offering 3 books. There's some add-ons, there's some bonuses. I'm doing packs of 6, that's 2 of each. Our average pledge is around $200, I think. I mean, 314,000 divided by 2,600 is what? Yeah, $120 average pledge.
Wow.
And so
That's actually quite
that's
large.
kind of the
Yeah.
goal. Yeah, just push that up as high as you can.
And then the video I thought was pretty funny. So when you first see the promo video, it's Tanner dressed up as a centaur. So he's got the back half of the horse kind of walking behind him. He walks into the room with the mist tail flagging in the background. But it's all done practically, right? It's like a skit you've obviously done with friends and family. I think this to me was number one. It was funny. I actually quite enjoyed the video. But it was a testament that you don't necessarily have to go crazy with the animation and really high end graphics to create a fun video. You can create a fun video very practically, and I think back to kind of the 10 years ago with Kickstarter, a lot of the videos were actually done that way. I've seen more of a trend now with board games specifically, moving more towards very animated in the delivery. But it's kind of refreshing when you see these fun videos that are done in a practical way. Also, when you scroll through the campaign, I mean, obviously you have very nice, beautiful design, but most of the images are static images highlighting, highlighting the actual campaign. Yes, there's some that'll show, here's how the kind of maps kind of fit together, so you can actually create a sprawling landscape. There's another one that shows how the people might move, and it's all done with kind of stop motion. But for the most part, you're able to communicate very, very clearly what this campaign is about, using great artwork, but not going crazy on the animation and things like that. And so for me, that was a testament that, if there's people out there that think that you have to do these kind of high-end animations to have a successful campaign, here's an example to show you that you don't. I mean, if you're on target to hit about $500,000, that's a huge campaign, right?
Yeah, I would say I had a unique luxury going in, this
Yep.
being my third campaign.
Sure.
I have 15,000 followers on Instagram. We have a private Facebook group of like 6 or 7,000 members. And then just within Kickstarter itself, about 18,000 backers that were ready to back whatever I'd put out next. So I was willing to go against what's the new normal and dress up like a centaur. But I think it proved that people don't really care. One thing that we've talked to with our marketers, and they were very adamant on this, and it's a thing that we've learned now since the 3D animated stuff. I mean, Kickstarter backers are smart.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pull a fast one over them. The best thing that you can do is be honest and transparent, and images that are 3D, and we have a couple of those on the page.
Yeah.
Especially in ads, don't do nearly as well as photographs of the actual product. Now, some people that are making miniatures, you might not be able to take it that far, but I mean, what you'd spend on a 3D designer to animate it is way better off getting a prototype as close as you possibly can and
True.
just taking a picture of it with an iPhone.
Yeah.
Like that's better than these 3D images. And that's kind of what we've seen, is that, especially with board games, the more realistic you can show it of having a real functioning product.
Mm-hmm.
And in the video, the much better off you'll be, the more money you'll raise, for sure.
So would you say some of the success levers that helped you, obviously one is, having a history of other campaigns that you've run successful, that you've now brought some of those backers over. What percentage would you say of prior backers are backing this campaign? Like, what percentage carryover? If you're just a guess, you might not have the actual number, but.
Yeah, I don't have the actual numbers. It's something I'll be able to get into a spreadsheet after the campaign.
More than half, would you guess, or?
Yeah, I might even take it higher.
Yeah.
2,600, I would say it's probably 70%.
Okay.
And that's why I always tell people, like, if you do your first campaign and you only get 200 backers and you barely break 50K, just stop spending money, go build the product, make it the absolute best thing that you possibly can, even if you have to spend a little bit more, and make those people happy. Don't sell it on Amazon. Make those people happy. If you have those people happy, you can then do a second one. I think the perfect example is Facade Games.
Yeah.
They have exponentially made more money with each campaign of their board game because they take care of their backers. Now, that said, if you look at mine go 1 million, 600,000, 300,000. And there's always a million excuses, COVID, whatever,
Sure.
product market fit. But I think that if you just read the comments on the page, you'll see that everybody's pretty happy.
Absolutely.
And I think that's super important for recouping past backers.
And I think a key thing that you highlighted was the audience that you've built too, right? So that is crucial, I would think, for any campaign, is you have to start building that audience, and then create a product that services that audience, versus kind of creating a product and building it and hoping they will come. They won't. Right.
Yeah,
So,
no.
would you say, I noticed that you have Green Inbox. I think I saw CrowdOx as your pledge manager. So For people out there listening, maybe just explain kind of what those two things are very quickly, so people understand what is Green Inbox and what is your pledge manager and the
Yeah,
role they
so
play.
yeah, Green Inbox does all of the marketing. It's about 90% Facebook ads,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure that includes Instagram. I'm not sure exactly where more of the traffic is coming through, and then 10% Google ads. I don't have a pledge manager yet. That is my fulfillment company, Crown Studios.
Oh, Crown Studios. Sorry, I think it's the
Yeah,
previous one. I
so
think I saw that on. Yeah,
yeah, I'm a big advocate of just having all your ducks in a row before you
yeah,
pull the trigger. We were doing a live Kickstarter review on my Facebook page, and one thing we were talking about is when a campaign doesn't have those type of things ready to go, they don't have a shipping table, they don't have fulfillment
mm,
ready, and if they were a first time creator and didn't have that stuff ready, like I said, Kickstarter backers are smart, and it was
yeah.
my audience were the ones pointing that out and being like, I wouldn't touch this with a 100-foot pole because they don't even know what they're getting themselves into. And so contracting those things out can be very beneficial and very smart. And I honestly think Green Inbox is the absolute best in the biz as far as ads go.
Sure.
But with that, they're the hot girl in the room, and they get to pick who they work with. And so
Yeah.
I send a lot of people their way where they just say,
Nah.
well,
So who did this fulfillment? Sorry, I apologize for getting that mixed up there. I quick glance. So is it called Crown Studios? Is that the fulfillment company?
yeah, Crown Studios.
And
Yeah.
who are they? I'm not familiar with them. What do they do?
They are they do game fulfillment. I don't know their full like I don't know who they work with totally right now. They're
Yeah.
fairly newer. There's some friends of mine from past companies and past acquaintances that launched their own fulfillment company.
US based, or
Um,
were they located?
so they are US based, but they have partners in EU,
Got it. Okay.
Australia, Canada. And so they're managing the fulfillment of the campaign. They also do all my website fulfillment, and it honestly is they're amazing. It's absolutely perfect. Totally trust them. They take everything from as soon as it's done at the factories, they take it over. They make sure that the boats get there, that the taxes are paid, that they get to their ports, that they get to the backers, and I don't have to stress or worry about it at all. And then they just charge a couple bucks on the shipping side, so I don't even see that money either. So
Nice. Well, so getting back to kind of this the pledge manager, that I found kind of interesting that you haven't picked one yet, or you haven't decided necessarily if you're gonna use a pledge manager. Um, and other people who are kind of getting into this game for the first time, maybe under the belief that they got to get that lined up ahead of time. But I guess in this case, you don't necessarily have to get that lined up ahead of time. You maybe, after you start your campaign,
yeah,
and as
I
it's
would
going, you can kind of start
argue
shopping around, maybe, right?
yeah, I would argue that there's zero benefit to lining that up beforehand. You'll get locked into percentages and fees
Hmm.
that could end up being astronomical. I won't name the original pledge manager that I used, but they locked me in for a fixed percentage.
Mm-hmm.
I thought my first campaign was going to do like 100 grand on the high end, and I would kick them a couple $1,000, and it ended up hitting 1 million, and I ended up paying them like 30 or
Wow.
$40,000. And I have friends who did the same amount on Kickstarter and paid them $1,000 flat fee, but they
That's good
waited to
advice. Yeah.
negotiate. Yeah.
And is there any other key levers that you would say for success that people should consider when they're doing a campaign? Like, what would you say is the biggest thing not to do? Obviously, being honest with the people that that are going to pledge for your game, and being honest what you're actually offering, and having your ducks in a row in an audience. What are some of the other things you would say are kind of key things you try to focus in on when you're doing these campaigns?
I think a big thing, Kickstarter's getting very fat. There are a lot of companies and people trying to capitalize on this new influx of gamers. It used to not be cool to be a dork,
Yeah.
and now we're able to frame our comic books and people think that's cool when they visit you in their office. And so there's been this huge influx of people trying to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
And you got to set yourself apart by being somebody that is trustworthy. And I think that that is key. Too many people have been burned on Kickstarter by, there's good ideas. One more recently, I've been really following the story very closely, and you should do a whole podcast on Kickstarter failures, because there was this guy did a table, it did about $600,000, and he was just zero qualification on building a product, ended up sending 400 grand to his factory in China, and the guy disappeared with all the money. None of the backers got anything, and backers are pissed. And so if you're a first time creator, there's going to be a ton of hesitancy.
Yeah.
And so for me as a first time creator on my first campaign, daily contact with my community, full transparency. I walked them through every step of the manufacturing process. I made sure that they knew that my prices were set long before I launched, and some people don't do that. And I talk with the guys at Green Inbox all the time, where he'll send me a campaign and say, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, yeah, it's a really cool idea. And he'll just be like, it's a cool idea, but I don't think they can pull it off.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it specifically takes for Green Inbox, the single greatest Kickstarter marketing team, to look at your campaign and say, you don't have what it takes to pull it off. But I mean, I don't want to be that way. I think it's just transparency, just be open and ready to learn. I mean, he'll deal with a lot of people where he'll say things like, you should change this on your page.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no. And I want to strangle them and be like, you realize that Green Inbox does like $10 million on Kickstarter a year for like 100 different companies. They're data driven, like you. But that's when people are like that, when Green Inbox tells me this is dumb, this should be like this, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so I think that's key too. I think a lot of people try to hide their idea, and I think you need to just share it. Nobody's going to do it.
Now, you have some experience in licensing as well, and we didn't get to this on our last interview with you. Can you talk a little bit about the licensing world?
Yeah, the licensing world is very interesting and very expensive.
Yeah.
You see licensed games all the time on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a first-time creator, guaranteed their big company or whoever owns that IP just built a Kickstarter page. Very rarely will first-time creators get an IP. And by IP, I mean intellectual property, like pick a TV show, they get that property to build a game around. And in the licensing world, there's kind of this idea that licensed games suck. And the reason for that is because these big toy and game companies own those licenses for games.
Yeah.
And I've seen it time and time again. I've been contacted by many of the big players saying, hey, we have the Indiana Jones license. Can you make a game around it? And when you go that way, you just end up with crap. There's rare exceptions. The Game of Thrones board game is great.
Yeah.
But outside of that, everything from the choose your own adventure games to the boys game on Kickstarter right now, if you want to look at one that you can just tell the gameplay was an afterthought. And so that said, most of the licensors are big players with deep pockets.
Yeah.
And if you want to push into that, you have to have a very special and unique idea. And the way that it works is, if you pick an IP that somebody's already using in a toy,
mm-hmm.
their agreement might cover board games, and you might just be out of luck.
Oh, wow.
And so what I would say is, if you want to go after intellectual property and kind of use that to sell your product, you have to have a really kick-ass idea. It's got to be a brand new play pattern, something super unique, something that they will see and say, this is going to make us a lot of money, because that's all they care about. And then on top of that, you have people that will say, oh, I'm going to go get the Marvel license. And Disney won't even talk to you unless you're willing to front $1 million.
Oh, wow.
Or you have a track record of a couple million in sales, or your idea is just so incredibly unique and amazing, and you were chummy enough with the licensor to pull it off, a good salesperson. Those I would say are the three kind of unique opportunities in licensing. Now, I've licensed one of my products to Warner Brothers, and that gets really hairy. They own so many properties and they need all sorts of permissions. So it's right. Let me see. It's this right here. It's the
Lite-Brite 3D Lite-Brite, right?
Yeah. So one of my patents, you mentioned the patents. I own any 3-dimensional light emitting toy. It's a very broad patent. It was granted last year. It's essentially, for those listening, just a 3-dimensional Lite-Brite. Think in the shape of like a pop vinyl figure or a vinyl collectible figure, with holes that you can fill with different colored pegs, and there's LEDs inside.
So did they approach you, or did you approach them?
So I approached them. I brought my Glowbot, is what it's called, and I made it into an Iron Man, and I basically approached a mother company. So the mother company owns all these different licenses in the toy and game world, and they'll see the product, they like it, they'll go shop it around. And so I actually made a Captain America and an Iron Man. I was shooting for the moon.
Yeah.
And I turned off all the lights in the pitch meeting, and I had it under a box, and I lifted up the box.
Yeah.
And the president of the company, his jaw just hit the floor, and he's like, we're taking this, done.
That's awesome.
And then they showed Disney, and they got pretty far with Disney, but again, really expensive. And Warner Brothers was willing to give us Batman. So we got Batman, Wonder Woman, Joker, Harley Quinn, and that one will hopefully launch sometime this year.
So did you go through like a broker? So how did you get to this? So this company that licenses the properties, they've got arrangements with Disney and these groups. Is that how that works?
Yeah. And so what that does is that helps you bypass those 3 clauses, right? You either need to have a ton of money up front.
Yeah.
You need to have a real good track record of sales, or just get incredibly lucky, or your aunt is in charge and you just got to talk to your aunt. And so we went with the middle one. We partnered with one of the biggest toy manufacturers in the world, Goliath Games.
Wow.
And so they were able to say, look, we're helping with this. And so that brought us this huge track record of sales. So then they were willing to partner with us. Now, there's a couple of ways that you meet those types of people. And I would say, with COVID, none of this is happening. But if you want to get into this world, I would start, as soon as it starts back up, hopefully 2021, the toy and the game shows. And you want to be very particular about them, because Gamma is a great show, but it is a mall. It is a shopping center. It is open to the public, and it is a huge waste of time from a creator perspective. But the good ones are New York Toy Fair, Nuremberg Toy Fair, Chicago Toy and Game Show. There's one in Texas that I can't remember, but the Chicago Toy and Game Show has a whole section dedicated to creators, and the licensors from Disney and Warner Brothers just walk around with a notepad, and they'll say, what's this? And you have 30 seconds, and they'll write some stuff down and move on. And so we took our first game, Builder Boom, to one of the toy shows. And I remember this old lady walked by, and I was so burnt out. This was New York Toy Fair. And I read her plaque, and it said Disney. And I was like, all right, let's lay down on the floor, because this game's best played on the floor. It's a kid's game.
Yeah.
And she looked at me over her glasses, this old lady. She's like, you want me on the floor? And I'm like, yeah, well, I'll help you down. I'll help you up. Let's do this. And she thought that was so awesome and so funny. And she had the best time. And she's like, we'll be back. And then she left. And the execs of Hasbro, Goliath, and Spin Master were just following her around, and in 2 seconds they were like, "Who was that? That was Disney, right? Yes. Okay, what did she want? Show us your game. We want it." Just because she was interested in it.
That's crazy.
And
Wow.
so yeah, and then there's the licensing show in Las Vegas every year, and there's toy and game sections of those too. And so go the other way, because all the big players with big deep pockets are grabbing IP first, then making games. But
Yeah.
if you can make something unique, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the only route, I would say.
So what's next up for you? What's after the Atlas is done? What do you have another project that's going to be coming out maybe in the first quarter?
So
or
we got 5 next year.
wow.
We got a new patented way of rolling a D20. I won't say any more than just imagine being able to flip a coin and mechanically get all numbers 1 through 100 even. So that's one that I'm pretty excited about, because it's less niche than just fantasy role playing. It kind of fits all board games and
Yep.
mostly role playing games. I have the one I'm most excited about, and since this is a board game show, I'll kind of mention, and I'm sure we'll get on the show again when it comes out. But it's Duck Duck Game, the board game. So it's Duck Duck Goose, the board game, the card game.
Okay.
It's purposefully designed to suck.
Okay.
But long story super short, you quickly realize that the lead game designer of Duck Duck Game is being held hostage, and he's hidden clues in the game to help you solve his murder. So it's essentially the first alternate reality board game where you're calling customer service and lighting cards on fire. I don't want to get too into it, but that one's going to be early next year, and it's going to be nothing like it has ever been done before. And that one we can kind of dive into maybe a little bit later, but
absolutely.
We're really excited for 2021.
I tell you, it is absolutely awesome to have you on this podcast with each of these interviews. I learn something new every time. So you're definitely welcome back for the next one. That'll be early in the new year. I just want to say thanks again, and all the best to you and your family, and in this holiday season.
Thanks, James. Have a good one, man.
Take care, man. Cheers.
Okay, see ya.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.